And we are live. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Today is Friday, June 17th, 2022. And today we're talking about the M2, which is here and is seemingly going to be taking over everything, much as the M1 did before. You'll notice we're one short today. We're both jealous that Karen is traipsing around Italy right now.
Very much so.
Yeah, so I hope she's having a great time and she's staying safe and she's enjoying all the I don't even know. What do you do in Italy? You're closer to Italy than I am.
Eat pizza. Oh man, Italy is a dream. It's probably my favorite place. But yeah, a lot of pizza, a lot of carbs, just in general, really.
Yeah, have you been? Have you been?
Oh yeah, multiple times. Yes, yeah. I was in Milan just a few weeks ago.
Oh,
yeah,
fashion.
So, Karen will be getting roasted. That is what's happening because we have a heat wave here in Europe just now. So I know it was kind of like mid to high 30s in Italy at the moment. So yeah, load up on sunscreen, Karen, if you're listening. Stay hydrated.
Yeah, I'm sure she's not. I'm sure she's enjoying her vacation. I am your host, Luke Filipovich, writer for iMore. I am joined today by my co-host, Stephen Warwick, our news editor at iMore. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm very well, thank you. I was feeling better before you reminded me that I wasn't on holiday in Italy, and now I'm sad. But yeah, good. Yeah, it's warm here too. Actually, we have a whole heat wave thing. So
yeah, it's warm where I am
fun.
Too. But it's typical summertime here. We usually get like really hot and muggy for a few months, and then we go back to being very cold.
Thick. the air is thick in Scotland. That's how I would describe it.
Oh yeah, it's the worst. It's the worst.
It requires effort to move through, which is never like a good. Yeah, no, not about that life.
But yeah, Stephen, the M2 is here already, and it's only been announced. Did you
buy anything?
No, I did not. I'm still perfectly happy with my M1 iMac. It still does everything I need it to do. It will probably run several versions of macOS as they update it over the years yet. I don't see myself needing to update anytime soon, although the M2 MacBook Air is very compelling.
It is.
I don't really have like a good Mac laptop right now. I'm mostly using the desktop for my stuff, and because I don't usually need to use a laptop, but every now and then it's like, maybe a laptop would be good. And I have like a backup. It's like a 2018 MacBook Air, so it's got some years on it now, but I'll use that in a pinch. But like, yeah, that's the only thing that might tempt me. And like I could see myself upgrading to it at some point, perhaps.
Yeah. One thing interesting that happened today that we did not discuss pre-show about discussing, but that we should discuss is, so if you don't know, the new MacBook Pro, the M2 MacBook, those pre-orders went live today.
Yes.
Just a few hours ago, and there's been a little bit of like a commotion. Again, look, you're saying you didn't. You're not in the market just now, but if you have tried to buy one, you've probably noticed that nearly none of the configurable options, so increased RAM, memory, and increased like storage, are available for pickup. So you can only buy the two base spec models. So that's the 256 or the 512 gig hard drive versions, both with the 8-core, the 10-core CPU and GPU, and 8 gigabytes of RAM. And then there's only one other configuration via Apple anyway. There are some like third-party spots that have them, but there's the 24 gigabyte version with a 1 terabyte hard drive in that specific combination has about a 6-week lead time. Every other configuration, every other shipping kind of configuration is not available, which I thought was really strange and bizarre. Like, I don't know why, because like I said, they are in B&H Photo, you can buy all of them. So I don't know why currently, when you go on the Apple website, if you've tried to do that today, you can't get any configurations or upgrades. We have reached out to Apple to ask, but we've kind of not heard anything back. It is a really kind of odd, strange situation. It kind of plays into the thought that maybe Apple did just put the M2 in the MacBook Pro, because they had some lying around, as opposed to, like, it doesn't make any sense that on launch day Apple wouldn't be able to sell, like, you can't buy the 16 gig. Like, if you buy a Pro MacBook, you probably want more than 8 gig of RAM, but you can't get the 16 or the 24 gigabyte version unless, like I said, you buy 1 terabyte of storage along with it, which is over $2,000 in options. So if you have tried to buy a MacBook Pro today, and you've been left disappointed, try not Apple, because, like I said, even Amazon in the UK has them, but for some reason, Apple really lacking in configuration models, which I thought was very strange.
Yeah, although I'm just looking at the site now, and
Has that all changed since I just
I
lied to all the viewers and
I
listeners?
think it's changed. It looks like they have additional options.
Interesting. Well, so that they're available, you can see them,
Oh yeah, maybe you can't actually
but
order them.
what is so all of them were listed as unavailable. I can have a quick look now, actually, just to confirm. Yeah, so like I said, that was actually one response I did get initially was, well, we can see that they're all there, but yeah, when you click on them, they're almost all of them listed as unavailable. Actually, no, actually, yeah, some of them have now. Yeah, so most of them are shipping about 5 to 6 weeks. So it looks like maybe just an early glitch out of the gate for Apple there, because it seems like you can actually buy most of the configurations now. But
yeah, so everything.
yeah,
Steven
that was very
said,
strange.
Everything Steven said
Was a lie. Yeah, welcome to the iMore show. It is Friday the 17th of June.
Yeah, no, that was weird though. Like, we know that, like, especially with really popular products, it's pretty common that, like, you know, within a couple hours you'll see like the shipping times really start to like
slip and
to
drop.
slip, but to like just not be
to
just like not be
just available
like
at all.
Not be available
weird,
at all is it's very weird. It was probably some sort of website glitch. It looks like it's figured out now.
The 512 has shipped a little bit. That's up to 4 to 6 weeks, but the 256, the very base model for $12.99, that is still available on launch day next Friday. So if you're in the market for an M2 MacBook Pro, I don't know why you would be, but there is still there are still models available if you do. Did you see the benchmarks that have come out with the new MacBook?
Yeah, with the M2, apparently, you know, this is over M1 performance. Geekbench has sort of like leaked the M2 MacBook Air Performance, and according to the test, single core performance is up by almost 12%, and multi-core performance is up by almost 20%. So definitely getting more juice behind the M2 chip for sure. At least that's what the early leaked info seems to indicate, which, I mean, isn't surprising. It's not like they would launch a chip that's worse than the chip they had already.
It's interesting. The single core score is actually higher than the M1 Ultra. But but those 10s, obviously, the chips are kind of multiplying usefulness when it comes to multi-core, so it's not always reflective. But yeah, the single core score has been very impressive so far, as has the multi-core, like you said.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm still perfectly like for what I need. Like my M1, like I said, my M1 iMac is just like, it runs so smooth, it runs so well, that, like, you know, I can't imagine needing anything for quite a few years yet. In terms of, like, you know, my particular workflows. I obviously, you know, I'm sometimes not good with my credit card and I will buy things I shouldn't, but
we've all been there.
But like, yeah, I just like it's great that, like, the Apple processors, you know, it's not like the M1 was a one-off, you know, because the M1 was very well liked and very well you know, compared to similar chips from Intel and whatnot. But it's interesting that, you know, it's good to know that, like, it wasn't a fluke. It looks like Apple's got a good handle on this, you know, ARM making its own chips thing, and designing its own chips. So you know, if you were one of those people who are still kind of waiting the M1 out to sort of see how it was going to go, which I wouldn't blame you, because it is, you know, completely new. It looks like if you wanted to jump in now on an M2, like, you're going to get a really awesome chip. Or if you want to save a little money and go for something M1 just to save a little money because money's tight, then you'll still get, like, a great computer that can still, like, do everything you probably need it to do, especially depending on what configuration you get and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing as well, these benchmarks, they're based on the 8-core CPU.
Yeah.
Like the Pro M2 MacBook comes with a 10-core one, so there's even kind of more potential to be kind of unlocked in there as well. And of course, the Pro has active cooling to kind of take care of that extra juice and stuff. So yeah, really good. And actually, we're starting to hear now that, like you said, the M2 is kind of spreading it and taking over, like much like M1 did. That we're probably going to get the M2 in like a bunch of new, I guess, different laptops. So like a new MacBook Pro, and also some iPads as well, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like we knew it was coming, right? We knew as soon as the M1 was announced that eventually there would be, some sort of a follow up to it. We thought it would come a little sooner, and then they kept launching different versions of the M1, which I thought was really funny. Then we got the Pro and the Max, and then we were like, okay, then
sticking them together more and more to make more.
Yeah, which, don't get me wrong, is a really cool facet of how the chips work, like the fact that they could combine two Maxes to make the Ultra, and how it how it talks to each other, and how that actually works is very, very innovative and very cool. And like, to have access to kind of all that memory, since they are sort of, they're like CPU and GPU all in one, pretty much. So it's a really cool, from a technological standpoint, it's really cool. But it was just funny. I remember like specifically when they launched the M1 Ultra, I remember being like, oh, okay, not an M2, because at that point it was like, we had the Max and the Pro, or the Pro and the Max, and so we're like, okay, probably another, like the next time they launch something, that an M2 will be what it is. And then nope, it was an M1 Ultra. They pulled the old.
Look, I would love to tell you about this next news story that we're trying to discuss, but I think my Intel MacBook has like taken exception to this discussion and has just decided to like die in front of me. So I'm clinging on to the call for dear life. So if you could very kindly lay out what is going on in this this iPad Pro M2 story, because I do not have it in front of me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, totally. There you go. Your computers are listening, folks. Apparently, they'll know if you talk bad about their processors. So apparently a big iPad Pro refresh with an M2 chip, and apparently wireless charging.
I saw that. It didn't make any sense to me at all. M2 is, I mean, you just put the next chip in, right? And we do like a bit more with the thing. But yeah, wireless. And was it MagSafe charging as well, or was it just wireless charging?
I believe it was just wireless, I think. For at least that's what the rumor said, or it was unclear. This is coming from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, and apparently it's expected soon.
Yeah, I think we could. It's probably safe to do. We could get an iPad Pro refresh before the year is out, and that makes sense given with the M1 iPad Pro. When was that? Was that 2020, or was that last? No, it was last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2021 is when.
Yeah. So maybe it makes sense. I don't know. The wireless charging thing is strange. One thing I did see kind of thrown around was that the wireless charging could be for like reverse charging, because it maybe make more sense with a device like an iPad. You could drop your AirPods or something on the back of there to give it a little bit of juice if you need. But yeah, I don't understand why. Maybe MagSafe makes more sense, but just dropping an iPad on a wireless charging pad of sorts, like I don't know how practical that would be. Certainly, I know, for instance, I have a nightstand which has a like a very small wireless charging square, like literally an iPad wouldn't fit in. So we will see what happens with that, I guess. But yeah, M2, like it all makes sense as well, which is good. Yeah.
Apparently, the other part is not a lot of details on what this is, pretty much. But Gurman also expects an upgraded camera system. This year too. Probably, so not sure what that means. But.
Yeah, and that could be front or it could be rear, couldn't it? Which is obviously interesting. And it got a camera bump in the last round as well, which is so good to say they're still kind of pushing the envelope with that. The big kind of iPad Pro thing we heard, or we thought we heard, was that Apple's working on a 14-inch tablet. I can't remember. Had this happened when we got the last show out last time? Did we discuss this last week? I honestly can't remember.
No, last week we talked all about WWDC.
Of course we did. So since then we've heard that Apple's working on a 14-inch iPad. Now this was postulated at the time as a 14-inch iPad Pro to go along with, as we've already said, a new 11-inch and a new 12.9-inch. And then it came out earlier this week that this 14-inch iPad may actually not be a Pro iPad, because it doesn't have two very distinctly Pro features, namely the mini LED display and Pro Motion, so like a variable 120 hertz refresh rate and lower. So it's possible that this is maybe like a larger iPad, but it doesn't have all of the pro features of. I mean, the display features do make sense because obviously they are more expensive to put in an iPad, and then when you
Yeah.
make the display bigger, you sort of multiply that cost by, whatever percentage you're increasing the size of the display. So what do you think about like a 14-inch iPad, but not an iPad, not necessarily an iPad Pro, or like a 14-inch iPad where viewing isn't maybe the prime focus? Because this is a little strange to me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's so apparently it's rumored that it's a 14.1-inch display, so slightly bigger than 14, but essentially 14. And I don't know, like I feel like if this was an iPad Pro, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. The people who just want bigger screens, a bigger workspace, artists or architects or like 5 billion other different types of creatives that might want, that like that big 12.9 inch already and would be fine with something bigger. But yeah, if this is going to be like, is it going to be an iPad Air maybe? But that it would, I don't know. That would seem kind of odd, I guess, especially since like when the iPad Air kind of got its refresh to like the new design, the new like thinner bezels and design and whatnot, it like pretty much bumped up to like it's an 11-inch for the most part. It's 10.9-inch, I think, technically, but it's an 11-inch iPad now. It's the same as like the 11-inch iPad Pro, and I have the iPad Air 5, and like I personally can't imagine needing something bigger than that for what I do. I find that like something like that is definitely much like already kind of getting too large for me. So I'm trying to think if this is just an iPad, like let's not even say it's an iPad Air or an iPad Pro, and it's literally just like a big base iPad, that doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever, because I don't think people who get the base model iPad, which by the way, I think is a great device for what it is. A lot of people overlook it, but I actually think it's one of Apple's more important devices, is just the base iPad, because of how like relatively inexpensive it is compared to other iPads, and just how accessible it is. But yeah, this new one, like it seems like it would have to be like a new Air then for it to make sort of any sort of sense. Like if they
It's
did like
weird because
an Air
what
Plus, an Air
yeah,
Max.
we heard. So it's like an M14-inch. So it's the thing. It's a 14-inch. It's an M2 iPad Pro. So
Yeah,
we're
right.
not even like the M1 or even like one of the old A series processors. M2, 512 gigabytes of storage and 16 gig of RAM. So that is obviously a heavy duty device in terms of processing power, but yeah, it's a strange one. The weird thing for me as well, do you remember when the iPad Pro came out last year? We got the 11 and the 12.9-inch, and only the 12.9-inch had the Liquid Retina XDR display, right? The mini LED that powers it. But they both have variable refresh rate. I always get those the wrong way around sometimes, but it's definitely that way. Apple was that someone asked, I think it was the like execs who were, they're doing the rounds of interviews and stuff, why only the bigger screen had those the Liquid Retina display, right? And what they said was that people with the smaller tablets prefer the power, but also the mobility and the mobile workflow in as Apple a way as possible is to answer a question. But then they said the bigger one is the one that people buy because they're all about the visuals. I'm paraphrasing, but it doesn't make any sense then that if the even bigger tablet would not have like an even greater focus on the visuals. I mean, I guess you've got utility for drawing and things like that, but 14 inches is really big for a tablet when you think about the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So yeah, it was very, very strange. Like I said, it was almost that when it first came out, because it came from the same source, Ross Young from Display Supply Chain Consultants kind of said, 14 inches iPad Pro, and then the following week, maybe it's not a Pro because it doesn't have, like I said, the Pro Motion, the mini LED. Very, very strange, very bizarre. So we will see what comes of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the purpose of it would be to make it like not an iPad Pro at that big, because like I said, I don't know. I don't know who wants a screen that big, but not Pro, not like the most features that they possibly can get. But like maybe it's a bigger iPad Air, because the iPad Air doesn't have, mini LED or ProMotion either, right?
Correct.
So I don't know, that'd be interesting. I don't know how many people would get it, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure there'd be enough, but I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of it would be. But if they did like I don't know, if they did an iPad Air Max, I guess we'll just use what they would use for use their naming convention from the iPhone. I think it could be interesting product if people, if people don't need the screen stuff but want like a bigger screen. I don't know. It's a bit of a weird product. The iPad in general is in a bit of a weird place, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. But first, I would like to tell you about a sponsor of ours. Have you ever hit a technical snafu shopping online? Has filling out a payment field given you a headache? Has a mobile banking app ever been down when you wanted to use it? Capital One believes everyone deserves better backing. This means easier access to their money and more security. That's why Capital One is investing in machine learning. Machine learning allows Capital One to do things like fight fraud with random forests. Models quickly detect suspicious activity and make it faster to alert federal investigators. Identify how mobile app outages happen with causal models. Keeping our mobile app up and running doesn't happen by accident. Anomaly detection and incident response help determine why app outages happen so engineers can quickly remedy them. Speed up online shopping with machine learning at the edge. Makes shopping with virtual card numbers smoother and more secure. This technology is based on logistic regression models and running interference in the browser. It defines payment fields, which helps make using virtual cards easier and faster. The potential of machine learning is so big. See how Capital One is using machine learning to create the future of banking. Search machine learning at Capital One. Capital One, what's in your wallet? And thank you, Capital One, for sponsoring the iMore show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, right before the break, I said that the iPad is in an interesting place right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with how confusing Apple has been about the new changes in iPad OS 16 and what features are coming to which iPad and why they're coming to which iPads.
Yeah. We touched on this last week, didn't we? Because we were talking about Stage Manager.
Yeah.
Which is an M1 only iPad feature. And it was, in the keynote, Apple literally did a separate section for, things that are coming only to the M1 iPads. Now, obviously, right now, that is only the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, both of which are relatively new devices, and lots of iPads. And I think, possibly, understand, but I know we were all, discussing like iPads that have been bought recently have been, left out in the cold a little bit. By this, admittedly, it's just one new feature, multitasking. And there is always this kind of hard out, as it were, when you make a big generational change. So like Apple has gone from its A series to its M1, series chips and Apple Silicon, or when like, a console maker goes from Xbox One to Xbox Series S, the X or whatever, there is a, like a generational change, and eventually you have to start leaving devices behind and the customers who own them and stuff. But yeah, we were discussing Stage Manager, and the one of the things that had been kind of posited by Apple was that one of the, or perhaps I should say, it might have been almost kind of falsely reported that one of the requirements for Stage Manager is this virtual memory swap. Now, certainly Apple kind of touched on this and mentioned it in the keynotes. I know Craig Federighi, going around in some interviews, has talked about the importance of having high memory capacity and fast virtual memory as part of this Stage Manager. But basically, it's come to light. The 64 gig iPad Air, so that's one of the M1 devices that is compatible with Stage Manager, doesn't have virtual memory swap, presumably because if you don't know, virtual memory swap takes hard drive space from the iPad and turns it into RAM, so you can do more multitasking and stuff like that. It's been around for I had it on a Windows XP laptop that I owned when I was like 11. It's not a new thing, and Android has it for quite some time as well. But the iPad Air 64 gig doesn't have this, and I guess that's just because there's not enough storage to, start going and freeing up storage space to use as RAM. Mm-hmm. So 64 gig iPad Air doesn't have this feature, VMS, virtual memory swap. But it does have Stage Manager. So everyone turned around and says, well, hang on. We thought that virtual memory swap was a requirement of Stage Manager. So why are you saying this isn't? It's kind of fed into this narrative of, maybe Apple has made like an arbitrary decision to cut, people off from new features and old iPads and stuff like that. So a very bizarre kind of swirling situation. It's one of those ones. It usually happens after WWDC where a new software feature or thing changes, where the messaging just hasn't been fantastic from Apple. It probably could have got ahead of it. However, I don't think Apple is fully to blame, because we wrote an article about this during the week on the site, where there was a report going around that the Stage Manager did require VMS, like I said. Well, it came from an article, a publication. I won't throw them under the bus, but it was it was positioned as like a quote from Apple, and then it was removed after the fact and updated to say that this had been misappropriated to Apple, but everyone else had already reported on the meantime, so it's kind of already out in the ether. So yeah, it's a strange one, but the 64 gig iPad does, like all the M1 iPads, have has Stage Manager, but it doesn't have virtual memory swap, which is interesting.
Yeah, and to add a little complexity to this too, I still, I want to give Apple the benefit of the doubt. I want to believe that their engineers and their devs do think about long-term device usage, because, given their history of supporting their devices for as long as they possibly can, and trying their best to bring down features kind of across their thing. Like, obviously, it's not always possible when there's hardware limitations, and I understand that. But part of me is a little cynical about this, because we know that, like, so for the iPad Pro 2020, which is the one that's kind of at the center of this, just because it's the oldest, it's the first, it was the before the M1 iPad Pro came out,
but it's still a very recent device, and you would have spent a lot to buy that.
So 2 years ago, you would have spent over, thousands of dollars, like, depending on what configuration you got, but at least $1,000. I can't remember what they started at, but like 1,200 or something like that, I think. Either way, point being, you spent a good amount of change 2 years ago, and now you're like, okay, I have an iPad Pro, and I'm going to be able to use it for 5-6 years probably before it starts becoming maybe a little less feature filled, or Apple doesn't support it as much, or what have you. But now it's like 2 years later, it's already not really getting most of the features that make iPad OS 16 actually really different. It's obviously a feature, Stage Manager and better multitasking has been something that, not Stage Manager specifically, but better multitasking has been something that Pro users have wanted for quite a while. And we know that the A12Z Bionic, which is in the iPad Pro 2020, we know it could run Mac OS Big Sur. And so it's a little disingenuous to me to say that, like, there's no way it could run Stage Manager. I don't know. I'm not a software engineer, and I'm not a developer, so maybe there is a lot more in Stage Manager than I'm giving it credit for. But it's hard not to be cynical about it, just with the kind of messy messaging that Apple has had around it, and like the sort of confusion about what models support what. In fact, one of their hilariously enough, one of their I think it was their preview, their iPad OS 16 preview. I believe it's been updated now, but we actually caught a mistake in it where it said that the iPad Air 4 was gonna be able to do virtual memory swapping, I think is what it was. But then they actually meant the iPad Air 5. It was just a typo. That's nothing big deal. But my point is, like, it's just in general, there's been a bit of confusion about what's coming where and why it's coming where. And I understand why some people are skeptical to sort of take Apple's statement about, no, it needs M1 and it needs virtual memory swap and it needs all these things to make it work like the way we want it to. I understand why people might not take that at face value based on, what we know. But they are certainly they're certainly in a hard place. Like, part of this is on us too. And I'm not oblivious to that, to the fact that, we got the M1 iPad, and then we were like, okay, what does this M1 do in an iPad? Can we get something that it does good?
Yeah.
And then it's like, and then they come out with something, and now people are kind of mad about it.
This is, I saw Renee Ritchie tweeting about this week, actually. At the last WWDC, we all demanded M1 iPad features because it was like, why is this rocket ship processor in this iPad that runs like a glorified big version of iOS? Like, is pointless. Like, you're wasting power and you're wasting battery and all this, hardware resource that isn't being used. And like exactly like you said, lo and behold, the first M1 specific exclusive feature rolls out. Here's what we can do to take advantage of the M1. And now everybody who doesn't have one M1 iPad, ourselves included, both of us, are upset. So like, it's totally understandable. I think the weird thing about the kind of specific instance is like I said, it got out and it started to go around that virtual memory swap was the thing that powered Stage Manager. Now, I don't doubt for a second that, like I said, Craig Federighi has talked about this, and I'll quote him to avoid misconstruing what he said. It says only the M1 iPads that combined the high DRAM capacity with very high capacity, high performance NAND that allows our virtual memory swap to be super fast. Now that we're letting you have up to 4 apps on a panel, plus another 4, because remember you can use this with an external display, up to 8 apps instantaneously responsive and have plenty of memory. We just don't have that ability on other systems. And the official statement Apple put out alongside this is that to deliver the immediacy, as it were, on iPad as being a touch-based experience, you need the internal memory, the flash storage, flexible internal display interfacing, all of which is only packaged in the M1 iPad. So obviously, Apple hasn't said on the record that you need virtual memory swap to run Stage Manager. And the fact it works on this base model iPad Air, which does not have virtual memory swap, clearly shows that that is not the case. Although the other explanation is actually an iMore commenter, a guy called Tom Broxman brought up, is that where it says in the iPad Air's disclaimer that it doesn't have the virtual memory swap, it's about virtual memory swap up to 16 gigabytes. So it is possible that the iPad Air 64 gig has virtual memory swap, but just not to the full extent that the other ones do. And that would explain why Apple says it doesn't have this, but also why it can still run Stage Manager. So yeah, it's been a whole thing. And like I said, it's one of those things where it's just kind of, it has grown arms and legs, but it is seemingly like a really innocuous sort of problem to have. The more interesting thing that I think is going on here, and I'd be curious to get your view on this. Christine put a really cool article out on the site this week talking about how when we asked Apple for M1 specific or Apple Silicon iPad features, we did not mean multitasking, which we have already had, albeit it's not been great. It could have been improved, But I think probably, I certainly had in mind pro apps, right? So I do a lot of music production and like live performing through like MainStage and Logic Pro. And the idea of having those apps on the iPad is not only very enticing to me, it's something that's been rumored in the past that Apple is trying actively to do. Your Logic Pro, MainStage, Final Cut Pro, more photo editing with more layers and stuff like that. So does that ring with you as well? Is that kind of like, because it does seem it was like, okay, here's your first big M1 exclusive Apple Silicon feature, 4 windows, 8 windows on a device. Is that unfair, or do you think?
I'll say this. I partly agree with Christine. I agree that Stage Manager may not be the implementation of like multi-window multitasking that I kind of envisioned. I definitely envisioned something more akin to like Mac OS, where you could actually just like have as many apps open as you kind of want. Maybe not as many because there's still limited, hardware and whatever, but like have a lot of apps open and be able to just like resize kind of all of them and sort of just be able to have, like you would on a Mac, have a screen of just, your apps in your different corners or what have you. Steven became very blurry. His webcam just became drunk. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I agree that, Stage Manager is it's a step in the right direction, I would say.
Yeah.
I think,
Like you said, it's one of we demanded these features. It's just maybe not the one we were expecting.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, for, not for me personally, but I think for a lot of pros and stuff, they have been clamoring to like give us Logic Pro, like give us a full, give us that ability to have those full like desktop apps kind of experience, but bring them to the iPad. And I think that stuff is coming. That's just a hunch. I have no insider information. I think that is just a hunch. And I think that stuff is coming down the line. I don't know if they're just waiting for even more powerful processors, or they're just trying to, separate. I don't know if they still want, it still seems like they really want iPad OS to kind of be a separate thing than Mac OS, which I still am a big proponent of. I do think that they should stay separate. I'm not mad at any crossover we might see. Like you can get Stage Manager is also on Mac OS Ventura.
Especially with universal control, right, as well. You almost want the crossover to get the most out of that.
I still think that they do remain separate things. Unless we get into a situation where, and this is like potentially maybe crazy, but maybe the iPad Pros run Mac OS, but the rest of the iPads run iPad OS. And then you have there's a whole other can of worms to digest with something like that. But until that happens, or until they just, fully decide that maybe they do just want to make an iPad just a mobile Mac, I think we're going in the right direction. I agree with Christine that like this isn't necessarily the only thing we want, and this isn't like now that we have Stage Manager, there's not going to be people who now everyone's happy. Everyone's happy with the way that multitasking works, or everyone's happy with the using the M1 to its fullest potential, because I don't think they're even quite there yet. When just with Stage Manager, I think it's a good step forward. I think it's Apple does do this sometimes, so they kind of incrementally sort of improve things until they finally get to a final product that maybe looks to like what we were envisioning like a couple years back. Like Apple really does a lot of, iterations on things, and before launching them, I feel like, or not launching them, but like before like getting to like sort of like the final form,
I think that the thing for me that this sort of, I'm loath to call it a controversy, but it has sort of become, it's become way more controversial than it should have been. But the Stage Manager gate, as it were, has proven is that the moving the iPad on from the older generations with features like this that are going to cut out, huge swaths of the iPad user base. Not from, iPadOS 16 still works on all of these iPads. This is just one feature that will not be present for, you have to guess, most people, given when the price point of these iPads and when they came out. I think it's hard. I've totally lost my train of thought. What on earth? That was it. Has to be gradual, right? Because everyone's up in arms about this one new multitasking feature that won't make the jump across the whole iPad range. So imagine if Apple had come out at WWDC and said, "Okay, the M1 iPad and M series iPads of the future are gonna get multitasking. Pro apps. Here's Logic Pro, Final Cut, Main Stage. Here's, better photo editing, video editing. You can run 2 external displays instead of 1. Impossible unless you daisy chain them, of course. If Apple had done, that one huge upheaval all in one, then like think how much bigger this sort of Apple leaving old iPads out in the cold would have become. So I think, like you said, you're right in terms of the iteration of how Apple does things, so as not to, do 10 things and get them all wrong, or then be okay rather than do 1 or 2 things. But I don't think those things from consumer standpoint, that has to be gradual. Otherwise, like you said, the outcry would be, I think, kind of even greater in terms of like, hey, why does the iPad that I bought 6 months ago or a year ago and spent, $1,000-$2,000 on or whatever, not get these 10 new features that are in iPad OS? So I think it has to be a gradual transition.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think another thing to bring up that's super important, and you know, Renee, if you follow Renee on Twitter, our good friend Renee, he's also been talking about this a lot too, is that not only, you know, were we asking for features that were M1 specific or took advantage of M1, but also there's a lot of people out there who don't care about this, like a lot.
Yep.
There's probably more people out there that use an iPad, even that use an iPad Pro, that don't care about this
Yep.
than there are
Yeah,
that do. So
you have
there
to
is a
remember
bit
this
of
is it's a controversy like inside a microcosm. Like the vast majority, as with iPhone
mhm,
and iPad's probably you probably say like the Mac is like probably has the user base with the highest sort of awareness of this kind of thing, just because of like who is attracted to that device, right? Whereas
yeah.
so many people have iPhones who don't follow Apple or software or betas like that, so iPad probably sits in the middle. You got to imagine the vast majority of I think it was one tweet was like the vast majority of iPad users are angry about this. It was like, well, no, actually the vast majority of
Probably not.
iPad users probably don't know that their iPad runs iPad OS 15, that
Mhm.
it's getting iPad OS 16 in September. It was just
Yeah.
announced at WWDC what chip their iPad has, what the M1 is. So I think it's probably disingenuous to say that like there's a lot of people that are upset about this. Undoubtedly, there are some people. We have an iPad, a 2020 iPad Pro in the house. You've got one, I think, that is,
Mhm.
is not gonna get this feature. But yeah, it's not like a great big, the uproar I think that the people are making out to be. At the end of the day, I think it is just, like a bit complex, and it's just one of those things that's just crying out for Apple to just be
Mhm.
like, this is the answer, but I just don't think we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but it is what it is. But
Mhm.
yeah, the stage manager thing has definitely, I think, dragged on and out probably longer than it deserved to. But
Yeah,
hey,
you know, I wrote an article saying that the M1 specific changes, specifically like Stage Manager and Virtual Memory Swap and things like that, coming only to M1 iPads. Like I wrote an article saying that sucked, and it does suck. I do think it does suck, but that doesn't
mhm,
necessarily mean that it's affecting or that a lot of people necessarily, you know, in the grand scheme of things,
mhm,
care about it.
yeah,
It's just like Apple's just had such a great track record of like really keeping up with their devices and like
that's
heck,
the. Mhm.
like iOS 15 still supports the iPhone like 6S. Like,
Yep. Yep.
like I mean, it won't. iOS 16 will not. It's cutting out. I think the 8 is now the lowest it goes.
Yep.
Uh,
That's correct.
but I mean, like that's 5-6 years that they've been
Absolutely. And
supporting a
to
device.
Apple's credit, like you said, that's probably one of the reasons why some people are taken aback by this, is because it is almost seemingly so out of character for Apple to just,
Yeah,
dump like
it's
a whole bunch of like 2, 3, 4 year old devices,
yeah, and
off with a.
I think that was it for me. It was just kind of shocking to hear that, you know, a 2-year-old iPad Pro is not getting like a very significant update and one that's kind of been asked for, you know.
Yeah. Would
So
you do you think there's scope? I mean, we'd have to get into the technicalities of it, but Stage Manager exists on the M1 in like a certain configuration, right? You have 4 windows, possibly 8 if you're using an external display,
mhm.
very snappy animations, all that sort of thing. Do you think there'd be a market for like a dumbed down version of Stage Manager if Apple came out and said, okay, fine, you can have it on the not M1 iPads, but we can only support 3 windows or 2 windows or something like that? Do you think that's something, or do you think I feel like it's probably more painless in the long run for Apple to just make the clean break rather than go back and say, okay, actually, you can kind of have half of the feature most of the time if it means you don't feel as left out as not having anything.
uh I understand your point. I think I'm kind of in both camps. I think a dumbed down version would kind of be nice, just to, you know, to throw
Mhm.
a bit of a bone to the, you know, the people who are using something like the iPad Air Pro
Yeah.
2020, for example. I don't know how far back they can go, but like I said, I do have faith that Apple, because of their track record so far and because of like, you know, some of the stuff that's been covered in the past and stuff, I do think their developers really do try to think how to bring as many features as they can, even down the lineup as they go. And my assumption, once again, no information whatsoever, this is just an assumption. I feel like they probably maybe tried something like that.
They definitely did. I was just about to say, actually, you must have missed the news because it did come out this week. Craig Federighi actually said in an interview that Apple has tested that. It's not for want of trying. They tested this on older iPads, and he said it became apparent very quickly that they weren't going to be able to deliver the same experience. And this is one of the things he talked about. Is like they have this inviolate bar, this standard for responsiveness on the iPad, right? When you tap on an iPad app, you expect it to open. When you swipe on an iPad, when you're reading a book or you're surfing the web, you expect your iPad to respond. And that has always been like a hallmark of all of Apple's tablets. And yeah, it was as in testing on older devices very early on. Apple said it became apparent that just was not the case. And certainly I don't think people would want, to be getting, like I said, these features and it turning, your iPad into like a PowerPoint presentation, right? Or like a stop motion animation and stuff like that. There's actually, it came out is in the beta code. You can still see the tool that Apple was using to test the feature on older iPads. So they've obviously had a crack at it, and arguably that exists to switch it on in older iPads. So it is an Apple policy decision as much as it is like a technical constraint, because it is technically there. But I would kind of posit that Apple, for the most part, is probably choosing to do the right thing by not, because if they went the other way and said, okay, we'll give it to everyone regardless of what, like, imagine, trying to run this on like a 4th generation iPad mini or something like that, and like your iPad would like crumble in your hands and stuff like that, and obviously that would be terrible. So yeah, like I said, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Certainly, like I said, last year, lots of people were angry that we didn't get any M1 specific features, and now we have those features. We're angry about those. So what is Apple to do, really?
Yeah, definitely a rock and a hard place situation. And yeah, that's cool. I didn't hear that news that they had.
Yeah,
I mean, like, it's not surprising to know that they tried it on the older stuff. I'm curious if they did try, like you said, like maybe cutting it like down to 3 apps or 2 apps. And I'm curious at what that looked like if they did do it. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, I don't want them to bring any feature to any iPad, dumbed down or not, that makes the iPad run crappy. Like nobody wants that. That doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help Apple. That doesn't help you, the consumer. So like, I definitely wouldn't want that situation.
100%.
We'll move on in just a second, but before we do, Stephen, why don't you tell us about another sponsor of ours?
Thank you, Luke. Yeah, today's iMore show is brought to you by Alto. Do you have an account with Coinbase, or are you thinking of opening one? Do you own any Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, or any other cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency might represent the future of money. It's getting cheaper by the week, I think, at the moment. And it's one of the most exciting investment opportunities to come around for some time. But what about taxes? With an Alto Crypto IRA, you can trade crypto like Bitcoin and avoid or defer the taxes. You can get into investing in crypto and do it in a tax-advantaged retirement account. Alto Crypto IRA is the easy way to get into crypto in an IRA. You can trade all you want without the tax headache and create an account in just a few minutes. Start investing with as little as $10. It has industry-leading security and multiple ways to fund your account. Ready to take your investments to the next level? Diversify like the pros and trade without tax headaches. Open an Alto Crypto IRA with as little as just $10. Just go to altoira.com/iMore. That's ALTOIRA.com/iMore. Start investing in cryptocurrency today. Go to altoira.com/iMore.
Nice. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Alto, for sponsoring the iMore show. Let's talk about the crazy deal with soccer, or football, as you would call it, that Apple signed this week. It seems weird. Why don't you walk us through this, Stephen?
Yeah, this is so Apple announced on, I believe it was Tuesday, that it has signed a 10-year deal to be the exclusive streaming partner of Major League Soccer. Even saying the word soccer out loud as a British person sort of makes me want to throw up, to be honest. But yeah, 10-year deal with the MLS, thought to be worth $2.5 billion, so $250 million a year. And yeah, it will mean every single Major League Soccer game for the next 10 years will be shown on the Apple TV app, starting from next year. So that's all the MLS Leagues, Cup, the MLS Next Pro games, and MLS Next matches, with no local blackouts or no need to pay for a traditional like TV bundle. It says it's an exclusive deal, but this is exclusive in terms of streaming. So the games will still be broadcast on local networks and stations. So this will not be the only place that you can see the MLS, but it will be the only place that you can see every single game, regardless of where you live, and stream it live, which is pretty cool. This is the second crack that Apple has had at getting into live sports. Friday Night Baseball, that experiment is obviously still ongoing, and I think it's been largely well received in parts, and certainly for some of it. So yeah, I think Eddie Q, I think, kind of summed it up, where he's like, this is the first time in the history of sports. It might be the first time in the history of US sports, I don't know, but that fans can watch everything from an entire league in one place, which I think is unheard of. I can't think of a deal that offers that. And he said that was a dream come true for MLS fans. So for MLS fan, you agree? Let us know.
There's some weird things about this. So
yeah.
So first of all, the fact that it's true is, as far as I can tell, it is the first time in like North American sports, I would even say, because it's not up here in Canada either, that we'll be able to go one place to watch every single game. No blackouts whatsoever. No, nothing. It's something that, like, for me as personally, I'm a hockey fan, so I'm an NHL fan. I've wanted that forever. Like the NHL has a streaming service that of its own, but it has local blackouts. So I can't watch the team that I want to watch because
even the NFL Game Pass service, which is worldwide, that I subscribe to and watch in the UK, that has I guess they're not technically not local, but it has blackouts. So we have Sky Sports in the UK, which is like our biggest kind of cable network, if you would call it that. Right. So if there's a game on Sky Sports, you can't watch it on NFL Game Pass, and it's been a huge frustration. So yeah, this seems to solve one of the biggest pain points of watching sports
from a consumer standpoint. A weird part about this deal, though, is it is going to be a separate app that you're going to access through the Apple TV app.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's not part of Apple TV Plus like baseball is. It's going to be a separate thing. And another weird thing about this too is, I mean, Apple's paying a lot of money. Granted, Apple has a lot of money, but they're paying a lot of money for this, and they're not even really getting exclusivity that you would think a deal like this would come with. Like, typically when you see
money, not to be the exclusive broadcaster of a I don't know. Obviously, the MLS is not popular in the US like the NFL or the NBA is, but it does have a following. So
and it's growing. It's actually been growing pretty steadily over the last few years. I don't know. It's a weird deal. The deal seems great for consumers. Like, it seems great for if you're an MLS fan. I think, like, you should be pretty happy about this, especially especially since the Apple TV app and then the subsequent whatever app or service you have to subscribe to after that should be accessible on most smart devices, since you can get
it's not just your iPhone and stuff like that. Kind of any smart TV, basically.
So if you're an MLS fan, being able to go to one place to literally watch any game you want, you can follow your favorite team, you can follow the whole league, is clearly a great boon and something quite unique in the sports world over here in North America. I just wonder I just feel like Apple's getting the short end of the stick in this deal, which doesn't happen a lot with Apple deals. Usually I understand why they're doing things.
It's funny, like in the context of, certainly sports broadcasting, streaming, rights bidding and all that sort of stuff. We can't like wrap our heads around like maybe a company's doing something nice that doesn't, and I think the weirdest thing for me was the Apple TV Plus thing, because when this first popped up, I jumped in, started writing the news article. I was like, oh cool, MLS coming to Apple TV Plus, and I was like, oh no, it's not coming to Apple TV Plus. It is, like you said, it's just the Apple TV app, and it will be a separate subscription service. We don't know what the price will be yet, and I wouldn't hazard. I don't know enough about MLS to hazard a guess.
Who knows?
But yeah, it's strange. Friday Night Baseball is on Apple TV Plus, and one of the objections that I've seen thrown around a lot to that is that baseball fans do not want to have to, if they don't already, sign up to an Apple ID, which you do have to use, even though the baseball currently is free, in order to get access to this service. So Apple's kind of flipped that on its head now. So it's great news if you're not an Apple TV Plus customer and you don't want to subscribe to that, even though Apple TV Plus is pretty fantastic. But if you are an Apple TV Plus customer and you would be interested in this, this is another, could be $5 or $10 a month that you're having to, fork out for that. So unless Apple was to expand Apple TV Plus at some point to include MLS or other sports that it might add in the future. But I'm very, very curious to kind of see how this goes. But yeah, it is. The MLS is still negotiating with other actual TV networks. So there might also be a deal with ESPN or Fox so that those games can be shown live on their networks as well, alongside Apple. So you're right, it's a drop in the ocean for Apple, certainly when you break it down to a yearly basis. And that's also like it's not like a straight set of rights that Apple's paying for. It's kind of like a minimum guarantee. And then the MLS will actually get even more revenue if Apple sells more subscriptions than that is worth. If that makes sense. So this is 2.5 billion over the 10 years is the absolute minimum the MLS will get from Apple in order to sign this deal. But it could be double that if it takes off or whatever the course of the thing. So yeah, it's an interesting play from Apple. I guess they're maybe banking on the increased role that streaming is taking in sports, and that more people are trying to cut the cord, as it were, and get rid of all their packages and bundles and stuff like that. So very strange, very interesting. I don't know as well in terms of Apple TV Plus baseball, that is an Apple production, right? So it's Apple's TV crews, Apple's in studio teams or whatever goes out on Apple's, whereas it could be that Apple is, just broadcasting someone else's content here. So that's a big difference as well. So yeah, certainly different. Like I said, it's momentous news. If you're an MLS fan, I think this is probably going to be great, especially unless the package is, eye-wateringly expensive, which I would doubt. But Oliver wrote an excellent piece on iMore this week, and he basically described it as like too radical for its own good.
It's weird. It is weird to see that. Like it kind of seems like I say Apple's getting the short end of the stick. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. The thing I think maybe Apple's play here is just the fact that they clearly want to get into this sports business as we've known and now we've seen. So maybe this is really just kind of a proof of concept. Like maybe they're using this, and it's a bit of a smaller league. It's still it's a growing league, and it's it has its fan base, and it's been growing for sure. But it is smaller compared to the NFL and stuff like that, and the MLB and whatnot. But maybe they're gonna try and use, if this is successful, maybe they're gonna try and use this to sort of start conversations with the NFL or start conversations with the NHL, which I would love. If they could get a deal like this with the NHL, I'd be there in a heartbeat. I wouldn't care what it costs. I would the
MLS said as much as well. I think the commissioner kind of said it's not like a traditional deal. It's like a partnership, and it's the way it's set up. What Apple's paying is a minimum guarantee that the MLS will earn. But like I said, it could be substantially more than that, and that's how. So he described it as a unique partnership in kind of sports media. So it could be revolutionary. Who knows? Like you said, it might be that in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, Apple has a deal like this, or a streaming platform has a deal like this with every kind of major sport and stuff like that. So definitely big momentous news for MLS soccer fans, and certainly an interesting one to kind of see how it plays out going forward.
Yeah, and then the other part of this deal that I think maybe Apple's like you kind of already brought this up, but the MLS has been steadily growing for years now, and they've kind of been getting more and more popular, and the league has become more and more prestigious from what I understand too. I'm not a huge MLS fan. There are a few Canadian teams that I occasionally watch, but I'm not a huge.
It is MLS definitely fan, growing in stature. I think that's indisputable.
So so maybe Apple's just seeing this as a way to jump on early, and then and hope to kind of beat the crowd to beat the rest of the broadcast.
It's a 10-year deal maybe as well, absolutely. So I'm gonna imagine Apple's banking on some growth and such.
Yeah. So it's an interesting deal. I think one that surprisingly seems to be more beneficial, at least on the surface. It seems to be more beneficial to like us, the consumers, than it does to even Apple at the moment. But
you could, do you know what? That's
you never
interesting
know.
because you could say that about Apple TV Plus as well, couldn't you? Like, think about how much money Apple's pouring into Apple TV Plus. I think it spent $500 million just marketing the service, and
Yeah.
then all of the films and TV shows it has made, all of the star power it's brought in. It's charging, if you're paying for Apple TV Plus, which I don't think most people are yet, it's charging you $5 a month, and it's like Apple is using, I guess it's kind of its huge size to, make TV that is good for people but doesn't, cost a fortune, and maybe it's trying to do something similar here.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll have to see how it goes. I guess like Apple, Apple TV Plus has been around for a couple of years now, but it's still sort of like newish, I guess. And considering, Netflix is not doing well lately, as we all know, and has been like bleeding subscribers pretty steadily. Especially, it was like the first quarter, it was like 200,000 subscribers they had lost or whatever.
They're expecting another 2 million, I think, this quarter. So
yeah, so it also makes me wonder, how. I mean, I don't think streaming's going anywhere per se, but like, are some of the big players gonna like, make? Is this gonna change? Is this gonna trickle down to other services?
Just in the climate, like, think about like the climate we live in, like the cost of living increases and things like that. That I think pretty much everyone, certainly here, are facing stuff. I think people are just being a little bit more conscious about like what they spend their money on. So there's obviously, I think, a big market for like a $5 streaming service like what Apple has.
Well, and Netflix is just no longer the big dog, right? And they're now exactly. They're still obviously big, and they still have like a lot of content, but like they used to be the only place, right? But now there's just so many. There's just so many streaming services, and people have been pulling, like a big one that happened somewhat recently was like last year when NBC pulled all their shows off of, because now they have Peacock, right? And it's just like that stuff was eventually going to happen. Like the writing was on the wall. As soon as Netflix became as popular and as profitable as it did, the writing was on the wall that, other networks were going to be like, well, why am I, sure, I'm getting paid to put our shows on this, but why should I just not be putting our shows on my own thing and making more money? So it's definitely, the writing was on the wall for a while, but like it'll be interesting to see how Netflix gets through this. And I'm also interested to see like if Netflix just steadily keeps going down, like I don't know what happens. Like, is it possible that like what once used to be the biggest name in streaming and still kind of is the biggest name, I would say, I still think that they might, I don't know how many, but I think they might have the most subscribers still, active subscribers. So like, it's also, you got to put it into relative terms, but it makes me wonder like how far will it go? Because they're, like you said, they're expecting a bunch this quarter as well to have like, quit the service or whatever. And they've already made some steps. Like they cut off pretty much most of their animations that they were kind of working on.
Canned a bunch of shows, haven't they?
Yeah. And like they haven't been renewing. I mean, they've always cut stuff, but they haven't been renewing as much stuff, I feel like, as they used to. They also have all these deals with some A-listers of making movies, but I can go on a very long tangent about Netflix movies and the quality and production of them, and how I think they're more of a quantity over quality situation. But that might, and who knows, maybe that's leading into some of this too. So it's interesting to see where this goes. And it's interesting to see how Apple kind of, right now we're hearing a lot about the sports, but yeah, Apple TV Plus is still going strong. It's had some like great hits, right? Like Ted Lasso, great show. Severance was
global phenomenon, I'd say.
Yeah. Severance has been incredible. I don't know. Everyone should go watch Severance. It's a really cool show. And then like, with an Academy Award winner like Coda, right?
Yeah.
So they're, it's not like Apple TV Plus has it's not like they have a stink on their name. There's like some prestige there. So I'm interested to see how they kind of handle the turbulent waters of these next few years.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our show today. Lots of M2 talk, lots of beta talk, lots of money talk, as always here on the iMore show. I'd like to thank everyone who's following along, listening live, commenting. We appreciate you. If you are listening to this in your podcatcher of choice later on, we appreciate you too. If you ever want to ask us anything, ask us how the ask us questions about the beta, ask us what we think about Apple's newest deals, ask us anything. You can always tweet us at iMore or hit us up on Instagram at iMoregram. We're always happy to hear from you, and we can always discuss topics on the show. And thank you to Jim Metzendorf, our audio editor, who always makes us sound really good. We appreciate you. And until next week, we'll say sayonara.
Bye.